All right, starting the video with a laugh. Anyway, today I was online and I came across a YouTube video, and I guess it did something to me because it inspired me to post a video of my own pertaining to the topic that was presented, and that was social justice warriors. Apparently that's a thing now. But anywho, listen, whenever you're dealing with any sort of, revolution or push towards social change or betterment, there are always going to be two main groups of people. First, you're going to have the dissenters, the naysayers, the people who either don't recognize or care about disparities or systemic imbalances because they're not directly affected by them. And then you have the cartoonish outliers, the social parasites, the folks who are looking for causes to latch on to and exploit for a personal gain. There's a lot of folks out here who are simply looking for ways to build reputation, opportunities, resources, what have you. And it seems the easiest way to do that is by latching on to something with a little bit of steam behind it. Unfortunately, the opportunists end up becoming the caricatures, the dissenters used to build cases against the causes off of. All right. Case in point, I came across the video I was talking about earlier, the social justice warriors thing. It's a fairly popular YouTube personality. Going off on this spiel about how they're ruining everything, and how people from across the tracks are coming together with him in solidarity because they have a common enemy. And I just kind of shrugged my head a little, or shrugged my shoulders and shook my head a little. It was a little off-putting. Basically, if you're not familiar, the anti-social justice warrior group, they're just a bunch of whiny elitist assholes crying about the fact that certain individuals and groups have the audacity to speak out against predatory attitudes, actions, and behaviors. Yes, predatory attitudes, actions, and behaviors. And they're all like, "Hey, we're sick of it," as if to say, don't try to interrupt us while we're further normalizing predatory thinking, you asshole." And to be honest, I kind of get it. Like, some of them are just responding to the righteous minded assholes who go around trying to passive aggressively bully people into yielding to their own senses of authority on sensational matters. If the anti-SJW group is using that particular branding device to call out all the social parasites who are, trying to latch on to real causes and use them as platforms to build reputation and status from, then yeah, I get it. I mean, hey, screw those guys. And that extends to every asshole just perusing content and monitoring conversations, just looking for things to be offended by and react to, all the way to the wannabe conscious dumbasses who go around saying Hotep and acai and all that other bullshit. Like, I'm not down with that cartoonish shit. But let's just be real here. The anti-SJWs are just another group of whiny assholes whining about another group of whiny assholes. In the end, both groups are just looking for someone to blame and attack. Is there really a difference between a social justice warrior and an anti-social justice warrior? From where I'm sitting, the latter just seems like a shittier version of the first. They don't have anything substantive to say, nothing of value to contribute short of, "Here's why they're wrong and we're right," at which point they fire off a bunch of talking points with no real mechanism behind them, just things people in their peer group are likely to agree with and feel empowered by. So basically, you have two groups of cartoonish outliers trying to outblame and outrighteous one another, which is basically politics, which don't work. You know what neither group does? And we're talking about the SJWs and the anti-SJWs. Neither group spends a significant amount of time reflecting on the circumstances that created the opposing view. Like, social justice warriors are the toxic byproduct of actual pushes for social reform and betterment. And that doesn't just pertain to like fighting for advances in racial or gender sexual equality or whatnot, but also to 5-year-olds not working in industrial factories for 16 hours a day. People had to protest in order for there to be industry standards, regulations, and practices. Okay? Labor unions, the whole nine. Like, all of this is a product of people having to protest how things were at a given point in time. And even back during the time where 5-year-olds were working in factories for 16 hours a day, there were still malleable, stupid, impressionable, righteous minded assholes who themselves weren't necessarily affected by the circumstances of the 5-year-olds working in the factories, who were all like, I don't want to live in a country where a 5-year-old can't work 16 hours a day. That's not my America. Dumb fuckers. And they were all against anyone who was pushing for reform and betterment. And we're talking about kids. The majority is generally against change, even when change helps better the circumstances of their own. Yo, reform happens because people speak up. And it never just benefits those who are pushing for change, but it benefits society as a whole. And our current, I guess, technological industrial status is kind of a testament to that. Granted, we're still way behind the curve, but things get progressively better when multiple perspectives work together to find that sweet spot. We always get close to the sweet spot, just for a little bit, when multiple perspectives are accounted for and called upon to help round out our general perception, our general social perception. But anywho, like seriously, even atheists or homosexuals could be killed for simply sharing their views or lifestyle practices not even a full century ago. Even in parts of the world today, they can still be killed for these same things. So what are they up against? What is this invisible force that people are constantly under threat from? In a phrase, predatory thinking. They're up against predatory thinking. They're up against a body of social norms that make it okay, acceptable, and even funny to inflict physical and verbal injury onto others based exclusively on social differences. Not natural differences, at least not substantive natural differences anyway, but social differences. How dangerous is it to live in a world where no clear distinctions are made between humor, marginalization, and character attacks, which ultimately translate into verbal and physical assault? How much more dangerous is it when this predatory behavior is rewarded and incentivized in a culture and no one stands up to contest it? When no one stands up and seeks to interrupt the trends in thinking that lead people to want to attack, marginalize, vilify, smear, and destroy people they perceive to be beneath them. You know, people worry about being censored all the time, but I never really see anyone upping the ante when it comes to using the freedom of speech constructively. Freedom of speech has basically become people's right to fart into the microphone. And it's always defended by, yeah, I should be able to fart into the microphone because I like farting into the microphone. It's funny and it makes me laugh. And you telling me that I can't fart into the microphone is trying to infringe upon my personal rights. Like, really? Am I infringing on your personal rights? Or are you? Like, if the only use you can get out of having that right is the freedom to inflict injury on others, or the freedom to make people laugh with racially charged, sexually oppressive, or homophobic humor, then that right is already wasted on you. Okay, and let's just be honest here. The whole point of most people not wanting to be censored is for them to have the right to say things that will help them build reputation, status, and subsequently relationships. Why? Because they're trying to increase their presence, and in so, their opportunities for comforts and ways for advancement and survival. Basically, they're thinking opportunistically, and the easiest way to build reputation is with things like shock humor or saying things that appeal to specific demographics. Like the whole point of it is increasing presence. And don't get it twisted. Like I'm not a fan of censorship, but I mean, honestly, I think people should want better things out of speech than ways to marginalize and attack others. Like, if you're just regurgitating a bunch of shit that's already being said, how can someone censor you? You don't have your own thoughts. Oh, you personally didn't get your chance to say some shit 1,000 other people said? Wow, did that make the sentiment disappear? Is that thought or ideal type no longer in circulation because you personally weren't allowed to say it in a public place? For the time being at least, you have the ability to talk and converse your way to mental autonomy. And it seems most of y'all would rather waste that opportunity, that chance, taking turns farting into the microphone, saying a bunch of shit that 1,000 people have said before you and 1,000 said before them. For what? You've already surrendered your freedom of speech because your thoughts and words never leave the abyss of mental dullness you drudge around in all day. But back to defending predatory thinking. You know what a predator is, don't you? If not, look it up in the dictionary. In fact, just go read the dictionary. Read. Just do something to build this shit up here. A sexual predator is attracted to the idea of exercising and or imposing their sense of authority onto their victim or prey. Now, if a group of sexual predators hang out together and start normalizing ideas like inflicting injury onto their victims and then devaluing and dehumanizing those they seek to prey upon, and subsequently start trending others into, thinking this same way, in the same fashion, then it becomes a viral phenomenon. It becomes both a mental and a social disease. When people try to interrupt predatory attitudes, actions, behaviors, and thinking, it isn't necessarily because they're trying to censor people, but instead because they're trying to disrupt pathological thinking so that you don't end up with this irreversible tide of mayhem and intolerance. But to the anti-SJWs in seeing things from their perspective, the anti-SJWs are simply a toxic byproduct of people rejecting censorship. All right? Now, rejecting censorship can be a very useful thing when it relates to things like, useful ideas and perspectives and practices which are being prevented from being shared or even considered by those who seek to exercise a monopoly on authority. It used to be that people couldn't say anything or speak ill against the church or religion. And it's still that way in some parts of the world today. However, now people have the chance to question the institutions and the texts that purport to speak on behalf of God and represent God to the people. You can challenge things that claim to represent God, which you couldn't do when censorship was a lot more constricting than it is now. Hell, you can joke about all social institutions and hierarchical figures and constructions, all thanks to anti-censorship or tearing down the walls of censorship. Without censorship, again, there's room for us to grow into mental autonomy. Unfortunately, social parasites like the SJW and anti-SJW, yeah, y'all are social parasites too, simply want freedom of speech so they can shit on the wall. It's like a dumbass who would go into the Louvre with a can of spray paint just to tag his name on everything. Not that he'd have anything original or substantive to contribute to the art, like even from his own perspective, but instead, he'd simply do it in some misguided attempt to self-actualize through some vapid display of defiance. It's all for attention. It's all for status. It's all for reputation. And none of these groups or the individuals they're comprised of have even sorted out the language. They don't even know how to articulate that for themselves yet. They don't know what's motivating them to pick a side and want to defend it against the other. perspective. To the point, everybody's just looking for someone to blame and attack. The real question becomes how did they come to see things the way that they are? What were the circumstances leading up to their current perspective, and can those things be reversed? Can their perspective be healed? Instead of blaming and attacking them, why not just dissolve the issue in question? And it's not just these groups, it's every group. You can go white against black, you can go Christian against Muslim. It's always blame and attack. That's the only way that we know how to solve our problems. Blame and attack, blame and attack, blame and attack. We don't spend enough time questioning the mechanism behind why others perceive us the way that they do. When something's not working, blame and attack it, change it. If the next thing doesn't work, blame and attack it, change it. And it never gets to the mechanism. The problems lie in the mechanism, not necessarily where we perceive them. Kind of like in an illness, the cause of the illness is not the symptoms, it is the obstruction or the viral presence behind the scenes causing obstructions that create the disease to begin with. So time to think bigger. Normally I don't even deal with sensationalistic topics, or at least I'm trying to get away from it. But really, everybody needs something to represent, something to collectivize them with a group so that they can be against another group. It's fucking retarded. Anyway, that's my rant for now.